Hey, Mike, welcome to the Get in the Mode podcast.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here. Appreciate having this time.
Yeah, thanks. For the benefit of our listeners and viewers, can you give us a little bit of an intro about yourself, your background, perhaps what your role at RecruitMilitary?
Sure. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at RecruitMilitary. I've been with the business for 23 years. So I was here in the first 5 months of the business, and it's been a exciting journey through those years. Going back, I served in the military after graduating from West Point for 7 years. I'm aging myself a little bit by saying I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. That was my combat experience as a young lieutenant. And I went out on my own in a real estate business for a couple of years in a partnership with family. Decided that wasn't the route for me. And after a couple of years of that, started a job search and found RecruitMilitary, which was great because it reconnected me with the military, which I was missing after having gotten out of the military. And so I launched into a sales career at that point for about 13 years, where I was selling for RecruitMilitary and working with our customers. Then moved into recruiting for a couple of years, and from there into marketing for the company, and then into a business development role, where I was working on building relationships with, really focusing on more of the technology companies inside of the talent acquisition space. And through that, started to really develop an interest in technology itself and learning about how to put systems together and how they connect and how they can influence a business, and found that pretty exciting. And then when RecruitMilitary was purchased by Bradley Morris, I was asked if I wanted to lead the technology for the new company. And I kind of joked with the CEO and I said, "You do know that I'm not a technologist by trade, right? I mean, you do know that that's not my background." And he said, "Yeah, I understand that. What I really need is I want leadership, and I trust you'll have smart people that can, do a lot of the work, and we just need to make sure we've got good leadership in technology." And so that's how I ended up in this role of CTO with the company. It's been exciting because we've had to do a lot of different change in bringing two companies together. And also because of the rapid change in technology, I'm never bored, obviously, because I'm learning. I'm kind of playing catch up all the time, and then also learning, just like everybody else in technology, all the new things that are constantly coming out. So it's an exciting role in our company. What we do is our purpose is really to empower veterans through meaningful career opportunities. And we do that by delivering military talent solutions to employers across the nation. So that's the core of what we do, is really try to connect the veterans with great employment.
Quite a diverse career or life experience, whatever you want to call it. I definitely want to talk a little bit about your military career and your career and your affinity to that. Some qualities that you can find there. Before we get into that, you mentioned about your company, being like a talent, sort of like acquisition / recruiting, helping people hire military folks. I'm curious, what is sort of like a core, I don't know how to describe it. Is it a quality or a set of competencies or skill base however you want to say it, characteristics, core characteristics of folks, of veterans. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the number one I've experienced is a focus to accomplishing a mission. That, if you're one thing that is drilled into you from the beginning, especially, at least from my experience in the Army, is that you're given a mission and you're expected to accomplish it. And so that really being a core, principle that you just gain and really instill in yourself, that not accomplishing the mission isn't really acceptable. So you do what you need to do to accomplish that mission. So I really see that being a key point for a person who has served in the military. Also, especially in today's world and the current generation of those serving, really great creativity too. They're being placed into situations that are, oftentimes very stressful in foreign lands, in cultures that they're not used to. And so they have to learn very quickly, and they have to be very creative in achieving those missions that I mentioned, that is core to being a military person. So mission accomplishment, that creativity, and the focus on getting a mission done, I think, are core tenets that can carry a military person well in their career after serving, and also serve the employers very well, who would add them to their team.
How do you think the military builds that, like, or even like an individual journey? Like, how does, I mean, usually people come in young, maybe they don't have that mission accomplishment, sort of like a trait. How does one build that?
A lot of it's repetition. That's one thing that the military, I think, does well, is in its training and its preparation of its people, is you really have a lot of repetition in what your core mission is. And that's why, like in our company, we really talk a lot about getting the right person on the right seat on the bus, because if you do that, then what you can do is really have that individual focused on what their area really needs to be, what their area of focus really needs to be, and then help them by giving them opportunities for exposure to maybe outside companies that are having to do similar things. Maybe it's conferences, but it's training of repetition of those things that are needed to succeed in those roles that people are placed into. And I think the other thing that the military helps on that is the training. You have mission accomplishment, but in the training, getting ready for that, is you are allowed to fail. And so it's okay to fail as long as you learn from that and don't do that again, on what caused you to fail. So learn from your failures and, press forward. And I think just the way that you have that repetitive training and that ability to keep getting better in what your core job is really how the military does a great job in kind of instilling that in people.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I think that, I often write blogs about self-mastery, self-discovery, and we kind of, before we joined, we even talked a little bit about like wake up, schedule and things like that. I think there's real value in certain areas of your life having some repeatable, some structure, and then that doesn't, a lot of people criticize hey, that's a loss of creativity, and like the tech companies typically want to give you like complete freedom, sort of like there's sort of like a tension there between either this or that. And I feel like, no, it could be both, right? It's
Yeah.
not either or.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. And I think it's a fine line, and it's also by individual, like you're talking about even a daily routine. My daily routine, for example, starts out with waking up and having a half hour to 45 minutes of prayer and meditation. That's just how I start my day. And it's a structure, but it's a structure that actually, to me, frees my mind. And it's the consistency that then allows me to be ready to go when I sit down in my seat to get to work. And so I think there's a lot of power in consistency. I see the benefit of freedom, but when it's unfettered and not tied to a mission, then I personally just see that as a challenge to everybody tying into what you're trying to accomplish then in that way.
yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, right? So it's sort of like a having purpose. Um, and you don't want to repeat something just because of, hey, this is how I live my life and this is what I'm doing. Um, how how does how can teams, or where does purpose start? Like, where do you think, who lays the groundwork for that? Um,
In our company, it was we've been on a bit of a journey on that over the last several years since Bradley Morris purchased RecruitMilitary, and trying to create that common theme or that common purpose between two companies that were in the same business but really did things differently. And so to the credit of our CEO, he took us through a journey that started with the executive team to create a purpose, and then from the purpose, our mission, and then from the mission, core values that drive the business. And then once we're comfortable with those, we took those out to the rest of the organization. And it's something that everyone, for example, every one of my team meetings that I hold, our purpose, our mission, and our core values are at the top of the agenda. It's just always there, and it's reinforced. And it's not just a one-time thing. It's finding, it's not that you like harp on it or you're always talking about it, but it's always present is what we really try to make it. And then more importantly, as you know, it's easy to talk about things, but we also try to live it. Now you're never perfect, but we try to do what we claim. And, when you do that, good things happen in the organization.
Amazing. Well articulated. Now, tell me, like, I looks like, at least with RecruitMilitary, it started at the executive level. I mean, this is my opinion. I think it needs to come, the vision and the purpose needs to come from leadership, right? Um, what do you have to say when sort of like, hey, it evolves, or it's more organic, it just kind of more is grassroots? Like, how, like, some folks out there have that opinion as well, right?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
does how do you maintain that? Maybe I'll kind of ask you the question, like, what is your opinion or views or perspective on this?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because I did fail to mention that a piece of what we did was we did form I'll call it a subcommittee where we had, we made sure that we had almost like the different demographics of the company represented in a committee to bring their ideas up as well. And those ideas percolated into the executive team, and was part of the consideration as we went through that. So we did form a committee, I'll call it, that involved, I think, between probably 10 or 11 different folks to get representation from the different departments and different levels of the organization, so that we did have that input too. And it wasn't only that executive thought. So we did include I'll call it the full organizational input as we went through that process.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also validation too, right? Like when you come up with the vision or purpose and core set of the mission, with the core set of values, I feel like the organization folks that are employees are going to, either, yes, we are that, you're right. Like there's that affirmation that comes from them, from, mid and kind of lower level management as well, right?
Yeah, and I think something powerful we did too, David, is in the last 2 years, we started a quarterly pulse check process too, that a survey goes out to the organization. Like I said, we as an executive team wanted to know that we were living up to what we were talking about. And so we asked for input from the whole company. And I think it's a great statement when we have, I think it's over, our last one we did in our last quarter had, I believe, between a 90 and 95% participation rate, which is astounding when you think about it, to have that many people care to give input about how they believe the company is operating and feel, I'll say, safe enough to also share critical points, I think is, testament that the organization as a whole is filled with people who care and, believe that we really are trying to live up to, what we've stated we want to.
Yeah, and I'm curious on, well, maybe we'll kind of dive into more of the leadership side, right? So the military organization is more hierarchical, and that's good. I'm curious, what are your views on leadership, and how do you what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, my views and how I operate, and I operated this way in the military too, was I received the mission from my supervisor, and that was my mission, and then evaluated that and figured out some potential ways to accomplish that mission, and then incorporated my teams, my junior leaders, into a decision process to figure out, okay, how as a team are we going to accomplish the mission, and then got agreement on the path from junior leaders, and then said, all right, go do it. And I'm here if you need me. If you don't have a resource, then don't wait a day, and let's talk about it, and let's get you the right resources. But if I really believe that, we're all adults, and we ought to be able to do the jobs that we're, hired to do, and that it's empowering to people to have them know that they're believed in by those who are in leadership positions, and that they're trusted. That being probably the most important thing, is the trust aspect. And when you do that, great things can happen, and great things can be achieved. because people really will take ownership, because I believe generally in the good of people, and that most people are wired to do the right thing.
Yeah, agreed. It's almost like you have the vision, the mission, and then right folks in the team executing. And then, you as a leader, you're just fostering an environment where people can work and get things done, right? And
Yep.
you're not in their way, on a day-to-day basis, right? So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just finding those places where you might have to interject, or maybe based on experience, that there might be some good reason to ask some tough questions. But other than that, kind of get out of people's way and let them do their jobs is really what I believe is the most important thing to do as a leader.
I want to talk about sort of power, authority. Those things are getting a bad rap these days, right? um Tell me, like, how do you view those words? Ta, especially coming from that background, your background, I'm curious to hear.
You mean like the words like power, David, or just authority,
Yeah, yeah,
those sorts of things?
that's right.
Yeah, um, I think that those are things that need to be earned, and that they're not things that are stated. That if you do the right things, you just gain those things based on how the world works and how people work. And that if you, again, going back to, if you trust people to do the right thing, then you're gaining power and authority without anybody saying it, because they're trusting that you've got the right plan, and you've got the best interest of the company and them as you make decisions. And through that is where power and authority comes from. It doesn't come through, a position title, or by being autocratic in your ways. My experience is, power and authority comes kind of up through the ranks, not from the top down. It's really based on how the leaders are being perceived by those who lead, is where I think that really comes from.
Yeah, it's I love how you said it's sort of like a byproduct of what how you are with the team, right? It's
Yep.
almost like you demonstrate certain respectable behaviors and actions, and things like that, the interests that you share, then you gain respect in that process, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it's over time, and then it's like the team is entrusting you with that respect and authority that comes from it, right? So
Yep.
what are your thoughts on someone, where does one start? Like, let's say somebody is in perhaps mid-level leadership positions, and they are aspiring to kind of move up the chain. How what are some strategies they could use to accomplish that?
I think number one important one in that is to do what you say you're going to do. And if you find that you can't for some reason, or something goes sideways in what you're trying to do, then don't hesitate to share that with your boss. Bad news doesn't get better with time. So, if, because things sometimes go sideways, so you just have to share that, and don't try to hide it, and don't be ashamed of it. Because most of the time, most people who are in that next level of leadership, I'm sure they had things go poorly at some point, because everybody does. And they're going to understand. What they won't understand is trying to hide it or letting it go on for weeks or months that there's something wrong. So just being transparent and it is really important. Another thing when you're in trying to, grow into increasing responsibility is, don't wait for someone to tell you what that next thing is that you need to learn. Figure that out and then go learn it. And when you do that, when you start getting inquisitive, have intellectual curiosity on what's going around. And, I mentioned I was in marketing, and that's when I started to learn about digital marketing, and digital marketing led me to technology. And then I was like, wow, this stuff's really cool. I'm going to keep learning about it. And I didn't, it wasn't that I ever planned to be the CTO, but it's been almost like a perfect role for me, because it allows me to, I have a mechanical engineering education background, but I did selling for years. And so I've got, a lot of problem solving in both of those areas that I'm able to bring every day into this role with CTO, and have a lot of impact in the organization because of all that we're trying to do as a company. So that's really exciting. And it wasn't anything that was planned. It was just every day trying to do the next right thing. I think that if you want to make it really simple, that oftentimes is it. Just figure out and do what the next right thing is in your role, and good things are going to happen for you.
Yeah, and I love how you said like continuous learning, and then I think leaders also need to have diverse experiences and background. I feel like that adds color to your leadership, like adds a lot of depth, than somebody who's just kind of been in one, like mechanical engineering, and they just kind of gone up the ranks and they don't know much about other domains and industries and things, and perhaps even like job responsibilities that they've had in the past, that kind of colors that too. So how do you acquire sort of like your skill base? Is it through books, podcasts, training courses? What's the best strategy that works for you?
I love to read, so I read a lot of different books. I also have found, I guess I'm maybe late to the game, but in the last 2 years, podcasts more have become very helpful. And, there's just a lot of good people like yourself, David, who are, putting out great content and having impactful people that are doing great things most of the time, that are probably hidden from the rest of the world. But they're doing awesome things in the organizations that they're a part of. And so I find that those are very helpful, especially when I'm maybe struggling to have a new idea or a new way of thinking about a problem or something. Podcasts are a great place to turn for that, because there's a lot of creativity in the world, as you know, and there's people willing to share it. The other place that I know my team turns to a lot on the technology side is, just knowing how to search effectively on the internet, and is a key skill in today's world, right? I mean, if you really
Asking the right questions, right?
That's right, exactly. Ask the right questions, and you're probably going to get great answers. Because, again, going back to my comment earlier, I generally feel that the world is filled with people who want to do good for the most part, and that there's so many people that have been so gracious in sharing their knowledge, and it's all out there. You just have to ask the right questions, and it will come to you. It really is. It really is almost that simple.
So now we have to know your top or maybe more recent books you've read, and the podcasts you've listened to, like anything you subscribe?
I recently read again. I had read it many years ago, but read again. Just Good to Great. The Jim Collins book.
Yeah, that's a great book. Like, he talks about level 5 leadership. What a book. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like history books too, because I think you can learn a lot just from like human nature through history books. And picked up again a book from autobiography on Benjamin Franklin. His different insights and ways of looking at the world are pretty interesting. And he was, someone that saw value in both kind of that intellectual curiosity, but then also I think in the ability to form relationships is what really made him kind of a unique individual that he had.
Never knew about him, because we always think he might be money minded.
Yeah, but he's
Economically driven.
Yeah, he's really an interesting guy though, when in reading that book. I mentioned earlier, I spend every morning in prayer and just meditation, but as simple as it sounds, I also just read the Bible and find a lot of wisdom within that to guide me in making just basic decisions every day.
Absolutely.
So that's be real powerful for me. And as far as podcasts, and I don't know that I don't follow a ton. What I do is research specific topics. And I use it more in I guess I'll call it a surgical way when I'm trying to solve certain things. One that I do listen to though, that's in the HR world, and it ties to HR technology. It's a rather oftentimes brash sort of podcast, but it's called the Chad and Cheese Show. A couple of guys that really know the talent world. And so they do a great job of bringing out information, and it's entertaining with their approach to the way they do it.
Where are you listening to podcasts? On a drive, or what's your usual, like,
usually for me, it's either on a drive or on a walk. If I'm going on a walk, if I'm going to walk my dog, I've probably got a podcast of some sort going on.
Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this podcast. I really enjoyed kind of diving into the depths of leadership. Kind of overall, I think these are often internalized or overlooked. I mean, there's nothing new here that we've talked about, but I think it needs to be stated, right? So I think that's where it's bringing that back to light, and and talking about that actually helps see I mean, like, not just internalize it, articulate it, right? So yeah, thank you for being a guest on our podcast.
Well, I appreciate having a chance to speak with you today, David, and thanks for giving us at RecruitMilitary an opportunity to share a little bit about our story, and hope that someone can maybe get some good direction or thoughts out of our conversation today. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely.